What up, YouTube? It's your boy ATrueHero. Here today with a top 16 deck profile from Peak of the Beak 8. And I was a bit on the villainous side, not playing Black Wings, which I'm known for, but dabbling with Vayu, however you choose to call it, Turbo. Now, as you can see, I have some interesting tech choices in the main deck. For one, if you look at the monster lineup, I'm not playing Hamster. Instead, I elected to play double Raikou, Charge, and Lila, whereas traditional lists play triple Raikou and one Hamster. Now, the reason for this change is because, in my opinion, setting monsters creates a slow tempo of the game. Not to mention, when you're up against the mirror match and you're the second person to set a monster, it becomes awfully hard for you to build advantage in that situation. And Triple Raikou just becomes victim of deck devy. And now we are in a deck devy format. And as you know, every time I talk about this card, I have to be the one to say it. It's because of me. I was the first one to main deck devy. All right? Check it out. Check it out if you don't believe me. All right? Anyway, that aside, going on to the spells, you can see I'm not main decking MST. And instead, I'm main decking Cold Wave. And the reason for this is because if you look at Vayu Turbo as a whole, it is a majority monster deck. And decks that play a heavy monster lineup go well with cards like Cold Wave, because Cold Wave can prevent your opponent from activating any back rows, and then you can just drop all your monsters and go for the game shot. Not to mention, if you look at the spell lineup, I'm playing an interesting tech card, Card Destruction. Now, the reasons for this is because there are some hands that you draw with Vayu Turbo that are all monsters. However, you don't have the monsters that you particularly need. For example, you open up hands with multiple Sirokkos, multiple Vayus, but you don't have a Greffer, or even Necro and Plague. So Card Destruction fixes this by allowing you to send those to the graveyard and draw a new broken hand. Last but not least, on to the traps. The trap lineup is pretty standard with typical Vayu lists these days. I am main decking the one oppression, whereas more recent Vayu Turbo lists choose to not main deck it at all. And the reason why I chose to main deck this is because although it's not very good against the big three, it's not good against Vayu Turbo, it's not good against Black Wings, and it can be good against frogs depending on the variant that you're up against. It's not so good against Dream Frogs, but against Hero Frogs, it can excel. Anyway, this card is really good against rogue matchups in tier 2 decks, such as zombies, gladiator beasts, etc. So this is why I chose to main deck the one Royal Oppression. Now, that's pretty much it for the deck profile. It performed really well throughout the event, and I wouldn't make any changes to the main deck at all, nor would I make any changes to the side deck. Honestly, the only reason why I didn't go further in the tournament was because I was tired. And for those of you who know, I live in South Korea. So when this tournament started for me, it was 1 a.m. in the morning. And by the time I played the top 16 match, it was 8 or 9 a.m. in the morning. So imagine literally playing all through the night, not sleeping the night before. By that time, my brain was fried. And I was playing some of the worst Yu-Gi-Oh! That I've ever played in my top 16 match. If I had like a day of rest to refresh my brain and then get back into it, even if the tournaments took place again at 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. in the morning, I'm sure I could have won the event. That's how powerful I believe this iteration of Vayu Turbo is. But you don't have to take my word for it. Test it out for yourself. So what I'm going to show you now actually is a replay analysis of one of my sets throughout the event. Me versus James Ark. And James Ark brought a fresh new deck to this event, one that he climbed the top of the dueling book ladder, and I believe he reached number 1 with this deck. However, unfortunately, he wasn't able to top the event. So let's take a look at it. Alright, so this is my set up against Luck Extreme, or James Ark, as some of you might know him. And this was the beginning of round 5. As you can see, I do lose the RPS. And I had no idea at the time what deck James Ark was on, but looking at my opening hand, it's very obvious what to do here. When you're up against a set monster and you don't know what deck your opponent's up against, you clearly just DDV them. So I DDV him right away, and as you can see, he gets hit hard. He loses 4 cards, technically 5. However, even though he lost these 5 cards, 4 out of the 5 cards that he dropped were fairies. And look what he has in his hand, Christia. So although I opened up quite strong, James Ark had the perfect counter. So he drops Christia and he adds Alchemist. Now, I do have an out to Christia, and that being Dimensional Prison, but it's not the perfect out. And let me show you why. Because here, he attacks with 18, attacks with 28, and of course I'm going to prison this. But now, if I ever destroy this Alchemist, he can add Christia back to his hand. And look at his grave. He has 3 fairies. So the moment I kill this Alchemist, he'll be at 4 fairies. He'll be able to add Christia to his hand again and summon it, no problem. So it's like I need to find a way to remove this guy from the field without destroying it, or by making it miss timing. And take a look at my hand. There is no way to get rid of this Alchemist easily. So the point is that I need to find a way to get rid of this Alch, and I just don't have a good way at this point in time. So I summon Card Trooper instead of Army Knight, because if I summon Army Knight and send a card, then he'll do exactly what I mentioned before. He'll crash the Alchemist into the Army Knight, so he won't activate the effect. He'll get 4 fairies, and then he'll add Christian and drop it. So Card Trooper is perfect because I'm able to mill 3 cards, because all I need to mill is a Vayu. If I mill a Vayu, and considering the fact that I already have Sirocco in the grave, then I can make Armwing, and then I can stack for Plague and make Dark End with Armwing and Plague, and I can go Dark End Send. So all I need is a Vayu in the grave, but I can't summon this Armageddon Knight to do so. So I summon Card Trooper, I mill 3, and I pass. He draws in a Call and a Haunted, which could be really good for him. He hits a Pot of Avarice here, which is a little bit unfortunate because, you know, he doesn't play that many monsters. And I drew into the charge off the Trooper, which is great because now Lila can come into play. I mill the second Sirocco, I summon Lila, and I switch immediately. Once again, I can't kill this Alch because then he'll have 4 fairies and I still don't have an Alch to Christia. Yes, I have Bottomless, but this just creates the same scenario in that he'll have 4 fairies, he'll drop Christia, he'll add Alchemist again, and then the cycle continues, right? So this Bottomless is not an Alch to Christia. He draws in a Lila here, he activates the effect, hits another Christia, and finally I draw into Vayu, which was actually a good draw because that solves the problem. Like I said, all I needed was a Vayu in the grave, and then I can go for the Dark End play. So here he recharges the Lila, and he thinks about what to do, activates the effect, hits a second Pot of Avarice, so quite unlucky. And now I can, on my turn, finally go off. So I go for the play that I mentioned, and I make Dark End. So Dark End Send, and now I don't have to worry about that. And I decide to put the pressure on. I have a read that this face down is not real, and I was right. It was just a Ryko. So here I'm able to swing for a lot of damage, and I set Bottomless, and he's in a really bad spot. So he summons Lila, I Bottomless, and he just scoops. So that worked out for me quite well. Now, game 2. Game 2 was a little bit of a tricky situation. Now here he has a set monster, and I have no idea what this monster is. So I have a read that this monster is something like a Recruiter, like a Shining Angel or a Nova Summoner or something like this. So what do? Is I summon Falsadina and I attack. However, in hindsight, I should have just summoned the Sirocco. And the reason why I should have summoned the Sirocco is because the problem with Falsadina is if I summon him first turn without having a stronger monster right next to him to support him, it's going to be really difficult to beat over monsters with a high defense. So right now you can see the situation that I'm in. Plus, if I summon Sirocco and I attack into a Recruiter, and the Recruiter tries to attack into my Sirocco to get something else out of his deck, I can just activate the Prison. So the correct play was actually summoning Sirocco turn 1, and then I can attack, and if it's Ryko, I'm okay with that trade. If it's Hamster, I'm okay with that trade, and it was Hamster, right? So in that scenario, I wouldn't have been able to set the Prison, but it's fine. I would still have a Sirocco on the board. And then on my following turn, I can summon the other Sirocco out of my hand, and then the False Dino would eventually come down. However, the point is that just summoning False Dino right here at this moment, yes, I can get some advantage by taking out a Recruiter, but at the end of the day, as soon as he sets a wall up, I can't get past it, especially in Vayu Turbo. So that was a little bit of a, unfortunate series of events. I prison a Lila, and here I draw into Deck Debbie. So I think long and hard about what to do if I want to keep this False Dino as bait. So I switch to the defense, and ultimately I just decide like it's not even worth it. Now the reason why I attack this hamster instead of just ending and Deck Debbieing is just in case he has a card like My Body as a shield. Because if I activate Deck Debbie and he has My Body, he can My Body, and then like this Deck Debbie will attempt to destroy the hamster, and then My Body will negate and destroy Deck Debbie. So I run over the hamster, I Deck Debbie immediately, and his hand is Heavy, Recharge, Christia, and Lila. And right now, as we can see, he has 2 fairies in the grave. So he attacks with Lila, and he gets really lucky with his mills because he mills 2 more fairies, so now he's at 4 fairies. I know he's at 4 fairies. I have perfect knowledge of his hand because he's under Deck Debbie, but there's nothing I can do about a Christia drop at this point. Like, yes, I could summon Sirocco, but then Christia would just run over the Sirocco, so there's no point in doing that. He draws in the Soul of Purity and Light. He adds the Herald, so like things are just looking like downhill. I take 28, and I draw into Mirror Force, which is really good. I'm able to run over the Lila. I know he has Heavy Storm, right? So what I do here is I attempt to bait him into using his Heavy Storm by setting Return from a Different Dimension. But James Arc knew that I was going to try to bait him, right? So what he did was he didn't respect the back row. And because he didn't respect the back row, he didn't activate Heavy Storm, and I was forced to activate Necro's effect. And the reason why I did that was in hopes of me drawing into a Caius. Because of course at the time, I did know that he had these 2 fairies in his hand from Deck Debbie, but at least if I pull into a Caius or even another Blackwing, I can activate some effect to basically get his fairy count off of 4, and then if I do destroy the Christia later on, he won't be able to summon it back as easily, right? Because this will be pitched, so he won't have graveyard control. But anyway, he didn't take the bait with the Heavy Storm, so this puts me in an awkward spot. So I draw the Deck Debbie, and I set the Deck Debbie, because I know now, if I have 2 back rows, what is James Arc going to be tempted to do? Exactly right, activate the Heavy Storm. And he can't summon the Soul Impurity because he has Christia up on the board. So I take 28, leaves me to 100, and now this Mirror Force can ride free. So obviously I just set Mirror Force in this situation. I set Cold Wave as well because he hasn't used MST, but he has used Heavy Storm, so I don't have to worry about getting heavied. He attempts to attack for game. I force. I draw into Greffer. I activate Greffer's effect, and because I have Vayu Sirocco, and I know he doesn't have a garden or anything like that. But the problem is the most amount of damage I can do is 4K, right? So I can do 4K here, but he's at 77, and now that this Greffer is in attack mode, no matter what he does, he can just summon Soul Impurity, run over the Greffer, and the game's over. So I activate the effect, and I just scoop immediately because the game's over. So then that brings us to game 3. Now game 3, I open up quite well. Like this is really good for a matchup like Christia Swarns, or basically decks that don't really play back rows, fairies, chaos fairies, etc. So I go Greffer pitch and I get negated, but I'm completely okay with that because I have Rhoda to follow up for next turn. So I can Rhoda Army Knight, send the Vayu, and then go for a big push. So he summons this guy, hits DD Warrior Lady, and this winds up being really relevant a little bit later on the duel. I draw on a Card Trooper, and I just decide to go in. So I summon, I go Banish, Special Summon Gale, half, and I attack actually with Armageddon Knight first. And here he actually acts damage, and it's like, the reason why I attacked with Armageddon Knight first was because if he Honest is here, that would just be good for me. Because his attack will only go up to 2,050, right? He'll gain 1,400. And yes, my Armageddon Knight will die, but then I can just beat over the Alchemist with my Armwing, even though he's used Honest. So I just think asking damage here was like just kind of silly, to be honest, because once again, there's a reason why I attacked in this particular order. Because most people would just attack with Arm Wing over because they're playing around Gores. But this attack order was actually playing around Honest, right? Which is a lot more relevant in my opinion. Anyway, so he takes the damage and he adds DD Warrior Lady. I just don't believe him that he has Gores. And even if he does have Gores, worst comes to worst, I can make an Armor Master or a Black Rose. So I make Armor Master main phase 2 because if I leave a 1400 up on the board, it's very easy for him to summon like a Nova Summoner or a Shining Angel, and then he can just like trade with my Armageddonite favorably, get a card out of his deck, and then possibly even run over the Gale. So Armor Master puts him in an awkward spot. Also, if he's able to somehow drop Christia this turn, like he'll have a difficult time outing Armor Master with just Christia, right? So he goes recharge and he thinks for a bit. He does indeed have the floater, so I made the right call by making Armor Master. He attacks into the Arm Wing. That's his 4 fairy, gets Honest, adds it to the hand, adds Harrow to his hand. So now James Arc is looking pretty for game 3. All right. Of course, he's down in life points, but he is in a very advantageous position. We know that he has both Herald and Honest in his hand, and he has a Christian on board. So it's just like, how do you lose? Like, how do you lose, right? So anyway, I draw on the Kaya, so I go Cold Wave because I have all monster hands, so there's no reason not to Cold Wave. Plus, by Cold Waving, I don't have to worry about like James Arc like brain controlling me or something like that. Now, I know that he has Herald and Honest, so I know for a fact he can negate an effect. I know this, right? But at the end of the day, I have to burn out this Herald, right? So I tribute for Caius. I burn out the Herald, so I know 2 cards in his hand. I know he has DD Warrior Lady, and I know he has Honest. So I attack here, I activate Armor Master's effect. So, I mean, this gives him, a token. So in case for whatever reason, this guy does survive another turn, I can like reduce him to 0 and like that be really impactful to the duel. So I end, he summons DD Warrior Lady, attacks and crashes, attacks, I take 28. So I'm in a bad spot. I draw a Dust Shoot, which is perfect. It came right on time because he has 3 going into 4 cards. Set Dinah because Dinah obviously isn't out to Christia. During his main phase, I Dust Shoot him, and we can see that his hand is all monsters, right? So we have to get rid of the Honest because the Honest is the problem. There's no way that I can win as long as he has Honest in his hand. So I send back the Honest, and after sending back the Honest, he summons Lila. He makes the correct attack order because he also had to read that I had like a Falstadine set. So Falstadine is able to kill this Christia. Christia goes on top. I take 17 direct. And now I don't have to worry about Christia anymore because during the end phase, he's going to mill it. So now I draw into Deck Devi here, which isn't the best draw. I do have an Arm Wing in the grave. So right now, I have to get lucky. You know what I mean? That's part of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is like getting lucky. Just like how game 1, like how James Arc got lucky and how he was able to drop a Christia turn 1, I need to mill a Vayu here in order for me to be in an advantageous position. So I summon, I mill 3, and on that third mill, that third card, we hit the Vayu. So you go banish, banish, make Armor Master, attack, we know he has Necro, attack over the Lila, we set the Deck Devi on his turn, we think. I know he has Shining Angel and I know he has Card Trooper because I activated Trap Dust Shoot. However, he just drew a card that is unknown to me. Now I'm at 1700, right? So this is my fear. I'm worried that James Arc pulled into a card like Soul and Purity of Light. So from my position, I'm thinking about the possible ways that I can lose this game. I know 2 out of 3 of the cards in his hands from Dust Shoot. I know he has a Shining Angel and I know he has a Card Trooper. Now what I'm scared of most is him summoning Card Trooper and milling 3. So Deck Devi would be able to destroy him. However, if Deck Devi destroys him, he could draw a card. And let's say that he drew into a card such as Brain Control. So he has 1 card that he drew for turn, plus the card that he could draw with Card Trooper. So if he draws into a combination of like Brain Control and Soul and Purity and Light, that's game. So I figure in my mind, if I Deck Devi him here, the best he could potentially have is just one of those 2 cards. And if he has Brain Con, then like he's the best, right? There's nothing I can do about a Brain Con. But if he only has Soul and Purity and Light, then I'll take 1600, I'll be able to draw a card and potentially still win. So I just go for the Deck Devi, and he scoops. So You definitely need luck to win, and we were able to clutch it out. Anyway, guys, give this Vayu Turbo deck a spin. You might find yourself liking it quite a lot. With that, guys, ATrueHero out. Peace. Shoutouts to all my current and former members of the Absolute Zero tier. You guys are the real MVP. To everyone else, if you're looking for exclusive content, please check out the Patreon. And remember, there's a hero in all of us.
Subscribe or you too will be sent to the Shadow Realm.